Okay, so we have Michael here and a few participants as well. So let's start the session. Let me introduce a few things about what we are going to discuss in today's webinar. So, hi everyone. As we all know, now immigration landscape is not just about eligibility anymore, and it's about interpretation, intent, and risk. So RFEs and NOIDs are no longer exceptions, and it's a part of the system in any ways, and we can sense the language. So a well case is prepared today often determines not just approval, but how much scrutiny it attracts. That's also one of the important part of the petition and getting an approval process. And this webinar is basically we designed to move beyond theory. We will talk about why the RFEs and NOIDs are being issued, how to anticipate them before, and how they arrive and how to be responded to them. So I'm delighted that we have Michael Hendricks here, and he's an experienced U.S. immigration attorney who will be sharing practical insights from the front lines, and we will see and understand how to, how officers are questioning and what is working and where most petitions fall short. Please feel free to drop all your questions on the chat box, and we will take it from there. Michael?
Hey, thank you so much. Yes, it's great to be here. I'm just going to get everything sharing so that I can share you guys my notes. Let's see, don't want to do that. All right, so once again, my name is Michael Hendricks. I've been an immigration attorney for well over a decade, been working in immigration for almost 15 years, done thousands of applications over that time. And so we are going to be talking about a few things today. Let me share my screen. Can you allow me to share my screen, Swati, please?
Yes.
That way I can bring up. And so we're going to be talking about a few things, including, as Swati said, RFEs and NOIDs. There are two Michaels there, Swati, so you'll just let them both share. That way I can use my computer. RFEs and NOIDs, we're going to do a quick review over the changes to H-1B. I think everybody's fairly familiar with those now. We'll talk about the effect for EBs, and the changes in standard operating procedures. So there's not been any changes in the law, so to speak, but there have been changes in standard operating procedures, the way that reviews are done. And we'll talk about practical advice as to how we can make sure that your application is fitting into the relevant the relevant reviews right now. Were you able to, Swati?
Yes. Can you check? I have given
There we
yes.
go. Now we have it. All right, so let's see. All right, and I'm going to put this on present. All right, so what I'm calling this is the end of checkbox navigation and the new adjudicative reality. So the end of box checking. So up until this year, a lot of the ways that we have looked at processing, especially certain criterion-based employment-based immigration processes, is they have certain amount of criteria. Usually there's like 10 that are laid out, and you have to meet at least 2, 3, 4, whatever the relevant requirement is. And so it's just about checking boxes, right? And you want to check those boxes. And instead of just meeting 3, you want to see, can I meet 5 of them? Can I meet 6 of them? And so I have more than what they require. So we're seeing that there is a comprehensive analysis. This is going to be a comprehensive analysis in the seismic shift in U.S. immigration adjudication, where extraordinary, especially for EBs and Os, EB1As, extraordinary now demands proof of market disruption and capital commitment, not just credentials. Very important, and this is actually the source of RFEs and NOIDs, the reason that we've seen an increase in those. So today we're going to talk about the adjudicative pivot, the understanding why RFEs and NOIDs are being sent out under the new rigorous scrutiny standards. Global policy shifts. We're going to analyze the 75 countries. That's the other thing we're going to talk about is the 75 countries with immigrant visa suspension and strategic implications. And then visa-specific challenges, diving in a little bit to H-1B, O-1, P-1, gatekeeping, including financial and evidentiary demands, and strategic responses, how we can craft some pitfalls that we want to stay away from and how we can craft proper applications in order to make sure that we have the highest likelihood of a positive ROI on our submission. So return on investment, it costs us time, money, and effort. And the submission, a positive adjudication, is the return that we want to see on that investment of, first of all, doing the education that got us here, building a career, building a level of expertise that then we can show is extraordinary. All of that is work that you've done for some of you decades, preparing, not specifically necessarily for this moment, but definitely bringing you to this moment of allowing that to be something that turns into a substantial benefit for you. So let's first talk about the adjudicative pivot. So USCIS has fundamentally restructured its evaluation framework. So once again, there have been no changes in law. These are either presidential edicts, which are like executive orders, or standard operating procedures. I was just talking yesterday to a lady that was a former USCIS adjudicator. And one of the things that she talked about was they're making sure that a lot of what they're doing in changing the way that they review is verbal, is like on a Zoom call with their meetings or stuff like that. Therefore, there's no documentation. So if we were to ask for a FOIA about internal meeting notes, there would be no meeting notes because there's no memorandum or no meeting minutes and stuff like that because they're not official. They're just the ad hoc meetings that they're doing with their teams. So they've transitioned from the traditional Kazarian two-part test to more holistic final merits determination. It represents more than just procedural refinement. It's a complete philosophical shift on how the agency evaluates high-level visa petitions. And as we can see, not even just high-level. The reason we've seen a suspension from 75 countries, there are specific reasons. So there is a shift that is happening. So it's beyond just technicality. They're no longer just asking. When I say they, I'm talking about the U.S. government, usually in this case, USCIS or the Department of State. They're no longer looking for just credentials, right? Do you have this credential? Did you publish a paper? Instead, they're looking at whether or not those credentials demonstrate a measured substantive impact on your field, measurable substantive impact on your field. Okay. Documentation now alone is not sufficient. Context and significant are more important or paramount in an application. This is also due to economic protectionism. So we see with EBs, Os, but also H-1Bs, that high-level visa categories now serve as a strategic filter for top-tier global talent, right? With the H-1Bs, we're seeing them shift to, we don't want global talent, we want talent that's already in the US. So current people that are already here that we've educated in our colleges and universities, we want them to stay and invest and get paid higher so that we're not pulling down the cost. We're not pulling down the economy through a lower pay structure, and we're not bringing in entry level. Rather, we're bringing in higher caliber, higher quality, higher paid people. So the adjudicative lens has narrowed. Only applicants demonstrating clear economic value. And this says national interest. It's not to be confused with like a national interest waiver, but things that are necessary for the economy in the US, that type of not a term of art inside law, but just the natural national interest receive favorable determinations. So it's also falling under the new substantive standard. Evidence must demonstrate not just an achievement, but something like a market disruption, a capital formation, or a field transformation. It's much deeper than just I'm present, I do this, right? I publish this paper, I have this patent. The era of credential accumulation has ended, and the era of impact verification has begun. So that's the lens that we're looking through now. And once again, This is not a law change. Truly, the IRA, which was signed into law in 1996, September of 96, it hasn't changed very much since 1996. There's been no substantive congressional change to immigration law. Most of the changes, standard operating procedures, policies, have all come through different forms, whether they're agency changes, presidential edicts, or just policies that are done internally in a process level. So let's talk about H-1Bs real quick. I'm just going to do a real quick review of this one so that you guys can be refreshed on this. But remember, there was a major shift in H-1Bs. Previously, we had this lottery where it was just a one-for-one lottery. It doesn't matter what you're getting paid. It doesn't matter where you're at. There's a one-for-one. If you file in, you register, you had just as much likelihood of getting one, or non-likelihood, right? Like you're unlikely to get it because 600,000 people would apply and 65,000 were given. So there was a very low likelihood that you would be approved for the application, the full application of the H-1B. Didn't matter what you were getting paid or where you were at. Sometimes education made a difference. There were a special quantity of them for people who graduated at the master's in the US. But most of the time, it was just a one-to-one. So, and there was no substantial initial fee. Like the government has its filing fees, but it wasn't that substantial, not for businesses, a few $1,000s. Now there's the $100,000 fee. We know that it only applies to people who are filing for an initial H-1B and are currently residing abroad, who have never been under the numerical cap before, and whose employers specifically are recruiting international talent, right, from overseas. Critical exemptions for this are the H-1B extensions, transfers, and changes of status. So if you're already here, or most of the time, if you've already been in an H-1B status in the US previously and you come back to the US, even if it's in a different status, you first of all don't fall under the cap and you wouldn't fall under the H-1B $100,000 fee. So the other change that came with this was it moved from a straight lottery system to a merit-based or financially based lottery system. So there's greater weight given to those who are in the higher levels that are getting paid more. Really, your level of experience is not exactly what puts you into a higher level, although normally the years of time that you have on the job doing something can help push you up. That used to be the converse, to where you have this many years, you're going to need to get paid in a higher level. Otherwise, that they wouldn't fall into the proper category for your level of experience and education. Now, basically, whatever you're getting paid, it's all based on what you're getting paid. That's what tells, okay, you're in level 3, you're in level 4. Those with the higher wages receive the maximum or a higher priority weighting. The ones in level 1 are in more minimal consideration. And so it's fundamentally altering the changes of proper probability for selection. And so it's trying to combat having a lot of entry level people come in at lower pay. So you're at the bottom end of level 1, when in the US there are people that could get that job, right? Because remember, H-1Bs, you'd only have to publish your job internally. You don't have to do like with the perm processing where you send it out. You have to put it in newspapers and trade publications and so on and so forth, and then say why you didn't hire those people. For H-1B, it's the perm light, right? It's the light version of the Department of Labor certification. So all you have to do is post it up for 10 days in your place of employment in a conspicuous location for people to be able to see it, and then give reasons why people don't qualify if they apply. But there's a lot less people to apply in your same organization. So it does change. Basically, what it's saying is we no longer want the entry level that are lower paid, bringing down the pay economy, but rather bringing in people who are higher pay. So it creates a self-reinforcing cycle as employers compete for selection priority through the higher wages. The effective floor of the H-1B compensations rises continually, pricing out entire categories of positions that historically relied on international talent pools. And that's like entry-level computer science and those kinds of things. A lot of them were, because we had hubs that would hire, 1,000 people and basically have them working for a technology hub that then contracted them out to Google, to Apple, to Microsoft, and places like that. So they're trying to get rid of those hubs and make you have to pay higher wages. So deep dive. Let's look at some of the reasons why we've seen some RFEs, and we want to look at context over quantity. So the citation scrutiny standard, very, very important, because this is one of the big reasons why we've seen RFEs and NOIDs. Okay, so now USCIS adjudicators are meticulously distinguishing between different types of citations, applying a more rigorous taxonomy that separates meaningful scholarly influence from superficial name checking. Okay, passing mention, for instance, your name appears in reference, like in a reference footnote, without substantive engagement with your methodology or findings. Here it is. 30 other papers were referenced in a footnote, right? Like, these are all the papers we pulled something from, but we didn't cite them directly. This is just where we got some information that helped inform our paper. They don't look at those very, very highly anymore, okay? If you have more of a substantive discussion, okay, work serves as a foundational element for another researcher's analysis with your methodology replicated, extended, or critically engaged. This could be that they come out and say, I disagree with this person's methodology for this reason. But their whole paper is based on, here is a methodology that has been promoted and put out. And this methodology, in my opinion, there's a better way to do it, or it's a different way to do it, right? But your paper is the basis for this paper, right? So this is really strong, because it means that other people in your field took your methodology seriously enough to write a whole paper about why it's not the right one, or why it's not the best one that could be used. Now, the thing that they're really looking at, and this happened a lot, was self-citation filtering. So self-citation, I write 8 papers. Each of my papers refer back to one of my other papers as a cite. Well, all of a sudden, now I've been cited 8 times on one paper, because every one of my 8 papers, 7 papers, because all the other 7 have cited back to this one, and this one cites to each one of those. And so this self-citation was something that was being used to kind of circumvent and make it look like you had more people that were reading and using your paper, when that wasn't necessarily the case. So officers systematically clean citation data to identify only independent third-party acclaim from scholars with no collaborative or institutional relationship to the client. Okay, so it's interesting, because there's a lot of memberships that work this way. For instance, I'm a lawyer, been a lawyer for a long time. In order to be a super lawyer in the group super lawyer, you have to go out to people that know you, that provide references for you. Okay, just like the EB1A. But there's no other time. They don't look to see if you've been looked at or referenced in another paper or another person's work that doesn't know you. That's much greater, because I can call my friend John and say, hey, John, we worked together 10 years ago. You followed my career. You know how good my work is. Will you give me a reference for super lawyers? And he'll write this glowing reference about the work I've done and how I'm such a good lawyer, right? But that's because he's my friend. He'll put in there, he'll make it hyperbolous, because he's my friend. So that's what they're trying to filter out, is just using people who you know personally or have an institutional relationship that would say something about you that may not necessarily be 100% accurate, or maybe just hyperbolic in the way that they're saying it. So the 1% is the new gold standard. Demonstrating top 1% ranking within your specific field has become kind of the de facto threshold for EB1A and O1A approvals in the current adjudicative environment. Now, that is not a rule, okay? Just want to make sure that this is clear. That's not a rule. That's a standard. Why is that different? A rule is something that must be followed. A standard is a point of measurement. So that's why it's the standard, not the rule. So the practical implication, citation letters must now include detailed bibliometric analysis, field-specific percentile comparisons, if available, and discuss explicitly on how the applicant's work has shaped subsequent research trajectories within the discipline. Now, this is the gold standard. Just remember, this is gold standard. There's also silver, there's also bronze, there's also nickel, whatever else you want to say. There are lower standards. It doesn't mean you won't be approved. But what it is saying is that the gold standard, where you know that you're going to have a favorable outcome, is if you can meet that standard. Not everybody's going to be able to meet that standard. That does not mean that you shouldn't apply. It just means that you want to make sure that your application is complete as possible. Okay, so let's Move on. Deep dive. So patent implementation trap, for instance. A lot of people have paper patents. Okay. I have a unique idea. I spend some money. I have somebody help me and I get a patent filed. They're now comparing this to reduction to practice. In other words, not just paper patents. Patent holding only carries a significant weight in adjudications, but the era of it being decisive is gone, right? They're no longer saying, oh, this person, oh, they must be up there because they've got a patent. No. USCIS now reviews patents not for just mere legal right, but a proof of inventorship, not a proof of impact. So they see it, a paper patent, as proof of inventorship, like I had a unique idea, not a proof of impact. So what the officers are looking now is evidence of commercial implementation, market adoption, or real world utilization. What does this mean? I created a patent. I have a patent, right? So I actually have 3. They're in the works, but they're getting approved. So I have 3 patents. What do my patents do? They are created as a unique idea for a new legal technology that I created that is built on a different type of architecture, data architecture, that allows for there to be more efficient processing, more data retention, and more expeditious processing through the system, right? And so including a proprietary corpus. So I can say, not only have I gotten this patent, but now I have 100 operators around the country that are using my patented piece of technology for their practice, right? That's what they're looking for. Have you created something that sets you apart, and have other people started using it, therefore showing that it's useful, it's not just on paper. So production environment and market performance. So if you do have it in the market, it is being used in the market. Once again, if you do not have the patent that is actually being used, that does not mean that you're going to be denied. That just means that it's given a lot less weight than it was previously, where you just check the box of, now I have a patent, right? If you can show that patent is now being used in a production environment, and therefore if you have enough data, a market performance like revenue data, market share, adoption metrics, so on and so forth, then this just increases your likelihood. So we're looking at gold standard versus what would be looked at before as sufficient to get approvals. So required documentation would be like letters from manufacturers confirming implementation, executed licensing agreements, product specifications showing patent claims, sales data, market analysis, adoption metrics, so on and so forth. These are ways that these are pieces of documentation, pieces of evidence that you can include that would increase the likelihood, decrease of getting RFEs, increase of being approved. So the adjudicative test: can a consumer purchase a product today that embodies your patent innovation? If not, USCIS will accord it less weight than it did previously. So O1, P1, the celebrity and expert scrutiny. So a lot of people do O1 while they're preparing for an ED1A. Remember, O1 is still extraordinary, right? So you may have a little bit less have to prove because you're not asking for residency, but you still have to prove you're extraordinary. So most of what I've just talked about still is true for the O1s. So one of the things they look at now, O1 standard now requires demonstrating that an organization's success was contingent upon the applicant's specific contribution. Now, it may not be the organization's overall success, but it could be the success of a specific implementation. Not too long ago, I was reading an O1, or actually a person applying for ED1A. And this person works for Walmart, one of the largest companies in the world, okay? And they created the technology that helped the POS actually develop into a better inventory to payment system. In other words, they made the databases communicate, understand the inventory, connect with shipping. There was just so much they did, and it was their specific work that connected all of these things together, right? So it's important. That showed that the operation of the new payment operating systems and the inventory systems and all that, that was contingent on the success of this person's work, right? So we were able to use that as a specific example. This is why this person's extraordinary, because not very many people in the world could have done and created the database and done what this person did, and it created a successful outcome for the company. So the critical role test: would the organization have achieved a comparable outcome without this individual's involvement? Okay. This could be that you have some Y Combinator group that is now investing in your new company idea and you're asking for an O1. It could be that. It doesn't mean it has to be a third-party company or a company that you're working for. It could be your own. But you still have to show that it is your work and your contribution that has had a critical role in the success of that organization. For P1s, used to, they would look at anything, right? Like, oh, you're a professional soccer player in, I don't know, whatever country you want to select. Well, but the problem is the professional soccer players, they have 5 professional leagues in that country and they go from highest to lowest, and you were in the lowest category. So you were like what we would call here the field team in the United States, or instead of you being in the MLS, you were in a lower soccer division, right? So they're affording a lot less weight just because you're getting paid to play. And they're looking at what is the comparative analysis of league standing within the international competitive hierarchy, documentation of media coverage, commercial metrics, third-party rankings, so on and so forth. So it's important to remember that just because, if you're looking for P, just because you're an athlete or an entertainer, that doesn't necessarily mean you qualify for a P. You still have to show that you have international recognition. And that has to be shown in more than just, hey, I've been on if you're an artist, an entertainer, I've been on the big screen, right? Well, I've only ever been on the big screen in my country and maybe one country that's next to us, but nothing other than that. So we have to be careful and make sure that we have the proper documentation to prove that we do have international acclaim. So let's shift a little bit to the 75-country immigrant visa suspension, legal framework, and strategic pillars. So the legal authority is 212F. Of the INA, the presidential proclamation grants broad discretion and authority to suspend the entry of any aliens or class of aliens where their entry would be detrimental to the interests of the United States. Really, what they're looking at is, are people more likely to need help from the government coming from a certain country? That's, at the end of the day, that's really what they're looking at, right? So this doesn't affect a lot of countries. It only affects 75. 75 is still a lot. But it only affects 75. And so what it's looking at is, are these people going to be coming here? Are they going to have a more likelihood of being dependent on the government once they get here or at some point in the future? They have gone as far as now saying that they should not only deny, put into 212G, which is like a holding pattern, the suspension of approvals. But even if people have already been approved for their immigrant visas, even if they have their stamp in their passport or their visa already put into their passport, but the passport has not left the consulate yet, they're supposed to take those back and put them in suspension as well, even if they've already been approved. So it's an infrastructure shielding, evaluate, pause for domestic capacity, vetting gaps. So we're looking at, can we bring people from these specific countries, right? Are they contributing, or are they not contributing to the national interest and for the America First policy? Vetting gaps, biometric and security data, sharing deficiencies. So there's a lot of these countries that they don't share data with us very much, so we can't tell if this person's been involved in criminal activity before. Maybe this person was previously engaged with a gang, right, or a cartel. And we can't get that information because the country doesn't share very well their biometric and data sharing information. And repatriation compliance are another concern. Some of these countries are refusing to take their people back. So if they get in trouble in the United States and they need to be deported or sent back home, the country is refusing to accept their alien or their compatriot back into their country. So that's some of the reasons they've done this. And the other one, of course, is the big one, which is whether or not they're going to be a public charge. They're likely to be a public charge. So it does require legal analysis. Now, good thing, this is only for immigrant visas. This is not for tourist visas. This is not for temporary employment visas. If you're applying for an O1 from abroad, if you're applying for an E2, those are temporary. They're what's called non-immigrant visas, and it doesn't affect them at all. So strategic responses to the new normal. All right. The adjudicative environment demands a complete recalibration of petition preparation strategy. This is what Swati, Open Atlas, all of these guys, we've all been working together for months now, trying to make sure that we're creating the best possible application packets for everyone using the system. Why? Because what we don't want is for you to get RFEs. We don't want you to get NOIDs. We want you to get approvals. But in order to get approvals, there may be a little more, it could result in a higher cost for people wanting to apply because now there's more work that's having to go in to the preparation of this, including the profile building and other things. So you just keep an eye out for that. It could be that this pushes the cost of this application going up significantly in the future. We'll have to see about that. But we're working on making sure that we have the highest standards possible and hold the whole traditional. I had somebody ask me when I was doing a consultation with them, well, what's your legal strategy for responding to an RFE? And I'm like, bro, I don't have a legal strategy for responding to an RFE because I don't want an RFE. If I'm already planning for an RFE, that means I failed to begin with. I want to make sure that I am pushing forward all the information. And he's like, well, I talked to another attorney. This person did. I talked to another attorney that said sometimes they hold back some evidence just so when the RFE comes, they can have information to give that's supplemental. And I'm like, that's a defeatist attitude right there. You're holding back evidence that could help prove your case just so when you get an RFE, you have something to respond to. That is totally counterintuitive to me, and it should not be being done. You should be submitting everything that you have that completely proves your claim. If they ask for more, at that point, you do a holistic review of what they're asking for, how you need to respond, what can actually be done. Should you even respond or should you withdraw? Are you at this moment not able to complete the requirements that they're asking for? So instead of spending more money and time, should you withdraw, try to put some more effort into it over the next 6 months and then reapply when you have a little more stuff? So that could be a legal strategy that comes into it as well. So success requires front-loading comprehensive evidence and strategic narrative architecture. So it really is a compilation of scientific understanding of what you need and artistic understanding of creating the narrative that shows that what you do meets the criteria. So front-loading principle, evidence mapping, visualizing the chain of command or the chain linking each piece of evidence to real-world outcomes, creating explicit narrative connections. How does citations influence subsequent research? How does a patent translate into the market share? So on and so forth. Independent expert pivot. So instead of having people who know who you are, even hiring an outside analyst that can come in that's an expert in your area that doesn't know you from Adam nor Eve, right? And can come in and can review your work and provide a third party, unbiased review of your work saying, yes, this person is extraordinary or no, right? And that may be something that people want to start doing before they even get to the stage of going all the way to applying. Is having the person come in, having a third-party analyst, and then having the third-party analyst really break it down into these are the ways you can improve yourself before you get to the point where you're going to apply. Quantitative benchmarking instead of providing percentile rankings if you have them, and then commercial validation. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like I've been talking a lot. So the path forward, legal precision meets strategic storytelling. We kind of already talked about this. The ROI evaluation framework. So the US government, just think about it like a business. The US government is now looking at your application as an ROI. If I give you this, how is this going to return on investment for me? I'm investing in you by giving you this major opportunity, which is an O1 visa or a residency in the United States. If I give this to you and I invest in you, how is that going to return? What's the return on that investment for me? So the substantive impact era demands more documentation. It requires evidence architecture that tells a coherent story of extraordinary achievements. With demonstrated real-world consequences, practitioners must become both legal technicians and strategic communicators, translating complex accomplishments into a clear value proposition. So, conclusion, document impact, not just achievements. You need to show real world outcomes. Front loading, making sure that the evidence that proves your case is in your application when you apply initially. Embracing the quantitative benchmark, percentiles, comparative data sets, so on and so forth. Adapt to policy volatility, because these things can change literally in a day, as we've already seen. So I'm going to open it up to any questions, thoughts, concerns that you may have.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael. It was like amazing and insightful. It's very much in need of understanding why we are receiving the RFEs and NOIDs. So anybody who has any questions, they can drop the questions in the chat box or unmute yourself and please ask.
No questions. Man, I did an incredible job explaining everything. Wow. Go me.
Yeah, that's true, Michael. So let me put up a question just to
Sure.
like start. So Michael, these days I've been like working a lot on RFEs and NOIDs lately in the past 4 months, and I have noticed that the scrutiny process of the additional evidence that they are asking for each criteria on, like, let's take an example for EB1A. So it has been like increased a lot. Like previously they were not asking much of it. However, they are asking like some additional support. So how does the letter of recommendations play a role, in navigating all these RFEs?
So I think there's a misunderstanding about what recommendation means.
Mm,
Okay. So some people think recommendations is they're recommending me as a person, right?
mm,
And that's more of like a support letter or a character letter, or this person's really good at their job. Okay. Oh, by the way, Swati, somebody said that the chat is disabled. You might want to check on that. It says the chat's disabled. So,
I'm
um,
checking. Yeah, I'm
okay,
checking.
good. Okay. So a a letter of recommendation, like we're talking about here, is much more about proving that this person has direct knowledge about a specific thing that you have been able to accomplish inside a known area for this person, um, and the result that it came to, right? The positive result, the outcome, and why it was you that was the person that should have been doing this and did do this and then came with a positive outcome, and then maybe adding also why someone else was not able to do this, right? So we had looked around, we had searched, there weren't very
Mm,
many people with the qualifications and the background, the understanding of this type of database architecture or this ability to connect databases to one another and to be able to communicate an API, whatever it may be, right? And I'm constantly talking technology because that's the world I live in too. So that's where I go. But there's other things as well, like to be pharmaceutical. This person came up with a brand new, theory on
mm,
how, SSRIs are distributed and how it helps a person overcome, depression or whatever it may be. There's all kinds of different things that could be used, but it's real world examples. So I would say that if they're coming back and constantly pushing back on these familiar people, then having a third party evaluator may be the
mm,
way to go, where you have a third party come in. Now, the problem is a lot of times the RFEs only have 89 days to respond. Very rarely they say 30, but most time it's 89. Maybe hard to get an actual independent evaluator to come in, be able to review your work, be able to review your papers that you've written substantively, and provide a good feedback or a good breakdown on what that person thinks about your work and whether or not it's extraordinary, right? And it had to be something that they know, that the government would know, like somebody of high level. And I don't have a person in mind, so it's not like I'm thinking of you could just ask Elon Musk to do this for you, right? I don't have anybody in mind, but it's having third party experts in specific areas may be a very good next step for people in this
mm.
current adjudicative atmosphere.
True. Okay. Thank you, Michael.
Mm-hmm.
I have just enabled the chat. Anybody who wants to still put any question, please post all your questions on the chat box, please.
I could put on the Jeopardy music.
Mhm.
Man, Swati, we're just such a good team. That's why nobody has questions. We answered all of them beforehand.
Yeah. Or if you guys have any other questions, please feel free to ask, if not related with the RFEs or NOIDs.
Like, for instance, we now have an AI that you can use. It's a subscription-based AI where you can ask questions, you can implement, you can ask for, formulated letters and so on and so forth, specifically and strategically targeted to immigration, so that you don't have any of the outside noise. So it may not be a long-term subscription. It may be a few months, 6 months, 8 months while you're preparing your application. But it is something that might be worth looking into in order for you to be able to not have to wait on other people to answer, but ask. Basically, it's my brain inside of a technology system, not a wrapper, and it's compliant, so none of your information goes anywhere else outside of the system. It stays directly in there for you. So a lot of people are getting very interested in that.
Mm. Right. It's an amazing tool, so I do use the tool. Michael, there is like a question from Neha. Are there ways to present academic or college level awards so they are taken more seriously and avoid RFEs? And are awards given by college have any value when applying for O1 visa?
So the O1 visa is showing extraordinary ability, right? Generally a person coming immediately out of college, unless you've done something else, is not going to be extraordinary in their field yet. I mean, that's going to be super rare. You really have to have some experience under your belt. It's not that no one would qualify, but you're going to have some significant proof, evidence that you qualify. But 100%. I mean, when I was in law school, I won the mock trial. So they do a mock trial for L1s the first year in law school. I have that little plaque sitting up on my wall. Why? Because it shows that I wasn't just good because I went through law school and then took years to experience it. I was good at what I did from the time I did it, right? But I was even learning and I was already good. So it was innate, it was natural. So yeah, those kinds of awards have weight, but showing a history of awards is way better. I won awards in college, and now, like for instance, at my law firm, I have walls full of awards. Why? I have a Who's Who award right here. Why? Who's Who in America. Why do I have those? So that other people can see, oh, he didn't just win an award one time as a fluke. No, he's gotten all these awards for stuff that he's done over time: customer service, legal trial work, so on and so forth. So it's very interesting. It can help, but it can't be like the one thing that you have that ends up qualifying you.
Um, yes, and I also wanted to add a few points over here that we can use the college or school awards to build up a history that you've been receiving through from a longer time. But the recent awards that you get carries more value in O1 and EB1A profiles. But definitely we can use it in the final determination section, which carries a lot of value at the end, and to show a history and a leadership quality that since a longer time when you were young in college you kept getting for the projects or independent work that you've been doing. It carries a lot of value in making the narration more stronger.
Yep. History of validation.
Yes. So, Michael, there is another question Rebecca is asking. Is there a high likelihood of an RFE if, say, we meet the exact number of required criteria? Say O1 requires 3 by 8, and we do that. Is there a high chance of an RFE or not if we just meet the 3?
So they do have a minimum criteria of 3 of 8, and that's in that section, right? So meeting the 3, I will say this: if you have 3 of them and they are deep, if you have multiple papers published, you have a book, and that thing has been cited, 300 times, 200 times, 150 times, and your book has been cited over and over and over again as
Yeah.
a standard, well, then 3 is fine. The problem is that a lot of people before their 3 were kind of pithy. Like, yeah, I've written papers, but they've not been cited. Yeah, I've written a book, but it's not really been read by anyone, right? Like, I have it on Amazon for sale, and it's sold 2 copies, right? That kind of thing. The problem is that when you only have 3 and they're not deep, but even if you had 6 and they were all very superficial, you would still have the same problem, because now it is not about the quantity of check marks that you do. It's about the qualitative impact
Mm.
of what you've done, how you show that I'm extraordinary, not just what I've done over time, but rather how this has had an impact into the real world. So that is where you're going to come in. So yeah, two would work, but only if, three would work, but only
Three.
if you can show a substantial impact in the real world.
Correct. Yes. Um, Michael, thank you for replying that in a very detailed manner. It's one of the important questions because we need to showcase the, continuous sustained acclamation throughout the, throughout the petition. And it is one of the reasons why entirely sometimes the petition get denied or get a RFE because usually we fail or the applicant is failed to showcase the sustained recognition and like for a longer time period. So it's one of the core areas where an applicant must focus on it. Trisha is asking, what's the landscape looking like for EB2 and IW, especially for industry professionals with no publications or research? Have you seen success with those cases?
So just like everything else, EB1A, EB2, you've got to work on the core requirements, which is advanced degrees or bachelor's with 5 years. So it doesn't have the same specific requirements
Mm,
as some of the other ones do, right?
mm,
But one of the biggest things is you have to show
mm,
that your area that you're working in is an area of national interest.
right.
Okay, so this is very important because not every area is of national interest. In fact, they're specifically delineated which areas they consider of national interest: medical care, certain other types of things that we have to have. For instance, the last EB2 I did was nuclear scientists, right? Well, because that's national interest. We want to make sure we stay
Mm,
ahead of nuclear science. And that could just be for energy. It may not be to make bombs, right? It could just be
mm,
nuclear energy sources and all kinds of stuff. But you
right.
want to make sure that the operation that you're doing, whatever it is that you're an expert in, is something of national interest. But it doesn't actually require you to be published. Although usually if you're of that level in an area where you have it goes from extraordinary to exceptional, if you have exceptional ability,
Mm,
usually of course you have to look at the national interest, so you're kind of overcoming some of that exceptionality, right? But you still have to show that you're high level in your field. So give you an example. One lady had that I did a few years ago. She had two doctorates and a master's, and specifically it was talking about how the plume effect. So she was a doctorate in meteorology and a doctorate
mm,
in chemical in something a chemical some type of chemical degree, and then the other one was in the way the effect. So she really was one of the top people in the world that could talk about if there's a chemical spill, if there's an explosion, how does the weather affect where that fallout goes, right? And
mm,
so that's of national interest because we could have something happen. We could have a Chernobyl happen here, hopefully not, but we
mm,
could have all kinds of things happen. And so we want to have the right
mm,
people on the ground to have
yeah.
preventative measures in place in order to
Mm,
be ready if some disaster were to occur. And so she's the person that you would want, right?
yeah.
Like we want her. That's our national interest. And
Mm,
she's the one that meets the criteria. She's the one that we want to bring over. And it may not just be just her. It could be that
mm,
10 people apply for that same
yep.
exact type of thing, but we want all of them. Why? Because we want to be best prepared. We don't want,
Mm,
we want America first, right? We want everyone here that we can get here that's going to be the best opportunity for us to be
right.
prepared for whatever it may be.
Mm. Yeah, true. Agreed with you, Michael. Michael, I think, okay, one more question came up. Will patent submission can increase chance of EB1 approval? Does the country where it is patented do play a role in decision making like US, India, etc.?
So obviously having a patent plays a role, right? It's one of the criteria. You have a patent, right? The question is that patent actually being utilized? And my answer would be no. If your patent is registered in the UK or India as compared to the US, if it's still a useful patent, that still goes to your extraordinary ability, right? You've created something that's unique, that has a real world impact. Now, can that real world impact be in the US? Sure. Maybe you'll create something else. Maybe you'll bring it here, right? But the point is you, right? And a real world impact. So what we're looking at is, did you create something, a patent, that create something that was then patented, that then is now having a real world impact? That's really what they're wanting to see. And then would we want you here? Do we want to invest in you the time and effort to have you here as a green card holder so that your efforts are now in the US benefiting the US? You're going to benefit the world. Any piece of technology can be used anywhere around the world, right? So if it can be used in the US, I can, like my AI that I've built, he could be used for immigration in Europe too. I just have to build the right corpus, right? So it doesn't matter. What matters is that you've had something that's been created that's had a real world impact. Do we want to invest in you? What would be the return on that investment if we did?
Adding to Michael's point, I just wanted to add a few more things how we can use patent like in the application form is like in two ways. Number one, if you have the patent in your name, what you could do is if you can, you know, um, be a licensee or licensor agreement with the commercialization with any other company who can use it and and understand the impact of it. So we need to show the royalty of the patent. That's where everything falls up. Then only the original contribution of the patent comes into the picture that okay, it has been used and it has been impacted. So usage and impact both go hand in hand. The other way how to use the patent is many times you have a patent, but you still have not got a chance to give your patent to somebody who can use it or its applicability. So you can always use that patent to understand if it is being used or it's going to be used, how the impact looks like. So totally depends upon. Sometimes we also can navigate with the pro bono patent letter and how it looks like if it is going to be used, how it will be impacted, or how the usage looks like. So there are two ways. Either you use it and share the royalties, or you show if it is going to be used, what will be the impact. So in both of them, in both the cases, it will be used in some discretionary ways. If you have a royalty, you can use it in the original contribution. If you don't have the royalty to show and you have to show the usage impact, then it will be argued in the final determination section.
Thank you for that addition, Swati. But I wanted to go back to the EB2 national waiver. So just remember, there was a core shift
Hmm.
between the case that was NYS DOT to Danasar. So back in 2016, under the matter of Danasar, this was one that changed to a more, it replaced the more rigid standard and established a more flexible three-prong test.
Hmm.
And so just it's not only viable to be able to apply for an EB2 national interest waiver without publications, it's actually becoming increasingly more common because they're kind of transitioning away from a purely academic achievement, which is where you're going to have a lot of publication and research, to demonstrating a real world impact. So I guess the basic lesson here is that the government is starting to transition to real world impacts versus just having theories, just having possibilities or having a paper written. They want to see how it's been used, how a patent's been used, stuff like that. So real world impacts. Just FYI on going back to the EB2 one.
Hmm. Okay. All right. Thank you, Michael. There's another question from Neha. How much does the reputation of the university and applicant earn their degree from actually matter in visa adjudication such as H1B, O1, and EB1A?
So in the US, if you're talking about a person applying for H1B after graduating in the US with a college or a master's degree, the you're not getting a higher approval. You might get more pay if you graduated from Harvard, right, as compared to graduating from the University of Kentucky or whatever it is, right, or a college somewhere with a bachelor's degree. But it's really about pay. So since it's shifted to pay rather than prestige, then that's how you're going to see an impact. As far as universities from abroad, I think that plays the same role, but it's also coming down to pay. But if you're talking about EBs and Os, yes, higher level education does provide a higher level opportunity. And the reason that is because it is one of the historical showings that you've achieved something, right? I
Hmm.
got into Harvard, right? And I graduated from Harvard, not only an undergrad with a 3.4, but then I went into a master's and had a 3.7, right? GPA. So it does play a role when you're talking
Yes.
about showing a history of achievement in your field.
Right, exactly. Right, agreed. Michael, I think we are end with the questions, no questions anymore, so we can like wind up. We are at time as well.
Okay. So Rebecca did ask how long it takes to prepare a final packet to
Uh,
submit USCIS, but that's something that she needs to ask directly because that's dependent on her specific situation.
yeah, it depends upon attorney to attorney, but general timeline takes like 4 to 6 weeks
Yeah.
um for filing and drafting, filing everything. Mm, yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you so much, Michael, for sharing beautiful insights and information about the current trends. It helps a lot to understand what are the, key areas to be taken care of since we have an administration and we need to like make sure that we comply with the USCIS and take a lot of precautionary steps. So this session really helps a lot. If you guys have any kind of questions, you can like straight email me, swati@visaarchitect.com, and also to Michael. Michael, could you also tell all of us your email ID?
Yeah. So Michael at alcanza.com.
Okay. All right. I will be sharing the meeting recording soon. So thank you so much. Take care. Have a great weekend. Bye bye.
Thank you.